Hi, everyone. Welcome back to English Unlimited podcast. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Jamie.
And if you are joining us today, you are probably, well, you're probably in the middle of a big goal.
Hmm.
Maybe finally cracking the code on English fluency or, committing to study every single day. We all start with these great intentions, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
You feel that rush of motivation. You buy the new notebooks. You download all the apps.
You're on fire for like a week. You're thinking, this time is different.
It's always different this time.
Exactly. But then what happens? Life happens.
Always.
That initial rush just disappears, the excitement fades, and then you start telling yourself those toxic stories.
The bad ones.
Oh,
I'm not disciplined enough.
I never finish anything important. Have you felt that? That like gut punch of feeling like a failure just because you missed 3 days?
I think everyone has.
Uh,
And that cycle of, starting really intense and then stopping in frustration, that inconsistency is what we are here to break today.
for good, I hope.
For good.
Yeah.
We want to tell you, our listener, that the problem is almost certainly not a deficit in your character or your discipline.
Really?
It's a deficit in your system.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Well,
It's,
good.
it's not me, it's my system. So today's deep dive is all about proving, with hard science, that consistency is not some mysterious talent.
It's not magic.
And it's not a struggle of just pure willpower, it is a skill. And it's rooted deeply in your biology and supported by clever, predictable systems.
Exactly. We've pulled together sources from cutting-edge neuroscience, looking at exactly how the brain forms and strengthens habits, and also detailed language learning research.
Including systematic reviews of the most successful strategies used by online English learners.
Our mission is to give you the blueprint, the actual science, for building lifelong fluency, not just, temporary motivation.
And speaking of motivation, we are going to expose a shocking idea from these sources, an idea that completely flips the script.
It really does. It's that waiting for motivation to magically appear before you start working is actually a fundamentally flawed, energy-wasting strategy.
A flawed strategy. I love that framing. It already makes me feel less guilty.
Right.
And to keep you tuned in until the very end, we are going to reveal a specific, hard scientific fact.
Mm-hmm.
The precise average number of days it takes for a brand new behavior like studying English after your morning coffee to become completely automatic.
And it's probably longer than you think. Knowing that number will literally change how you approach your daily practice.
It's data that gives you permission to be imperfect as long as you just.
Keep showing up.
That is the plan for today. But before we unpack all this incredible science, if you want more deep dives like this, deep dives that make learning English simple and fun,
And evidence-based.
please make sure you subscribe and like this episode right now. We are the English Unlimited podcast, and your support helps us reach more amazing learners just like you around the world.
Done the action.
Excellent.
Let's dive into the core of the issue. The biology that governs all consistency.
Okay, let's unpack this. So the sources start with a really strong claim. They say consistency is a skill that can be trained, not some innate trait.
Right.
I always just assumed that people who are consistent were, I don't know, born with more discipline or something.
Yeah, that's what most of us think.
So what's the fundamental difference between a skill and a trait in this context?
That's a great question because it changes the entire framework. A trait, like, say, your height, is often seen as something you either have or you don't.
Right, you can't train to be taller.
Exactly. But a skill, like riding a bike or playing the piano, is something you acquire through deliberate practice.
Okay.
And the sources are extremely clear on this. You won't always want to study English. You won't always feel like showing up.
Oh, I know that feeling.
But when you understand and work with your biology, you don't need willpower to muscle through every day. You build a repeatable foundation that just makes the behavior easier, regardless of how you feel in the moment.
So even if I don't feel motivated, I can still activate some kind of biological mechanism to study. What is that engine?
That engine is the amazing phenomenon of neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, I've heard that word.
In plain English, it's just the brain's ability to change its physical structure and its function in response to what you do.
So what you do, not what you think about doing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's the essential mechanism that lets you learn grammar rules, build vocabulary, and, crucially, develop habits that literally reshape the architecture of your brain.
Wait, okay, hold on. So our brains don't care about my big dreams or my vision boards or my intentions, only what I actually do.
Yep.
So if I spend like 30 minutes meticulously planning my English schedule for the week, but then I never actually open the book, My brain hasn't strengthened that study circuit at all.
That is the hard truth of neurobiology.
Yeah.
Your circuits are strengthened by repetition, not by thinking, not by planning, not by wishing.
Wow.
The brain doesn't register singular dramatic moments nearly as deeply as it registers small, consistent, repeated input.
So every time I perform an action, even a tiny one, even if I don't feel motivated, I'm actually doing something in my brain.
You're carving a deeper neural pathway that makes that action easier, faster, and more likely the next time.
I love the analogy the sources use for this. It really helps visualize it. The image of walking through tall grass.
It's perfect because it translates a really complex idea into a simple image. So think about the first time you try to walk through a field of tall, thick grass.
Okay.
The path is rough, it's overgrown, it takes a ton of effort, and you have to fight the resistance of the plants.
That is exactly how the first day of learning a difficult new English grammar point feels, like conditionals or phrasal verbs. It feels rough and exhausting.
Precisely. But what if you take that exact same path day after day, even just for a few minutes?
Well, grass would start to bend, the dirt would get packed down.
The path becomes firmer, and eventually a clear, strong trail begins to form.
A neural pathway, a highly efficient highway for that specific action.
That's right. Your neurons, the cells in your brain, they behave the same way, repeatedly firing the same circuits by taking the same actions, repeating the same English phrases, makes those circuits more efficient.
They communicate faster.
Faster, they need less energy to activate. And eventually, they become your brain's default setting.
So that's how consistency is built. Through daily action that literally teaches my brain, hey, this behavior belongs here, let's automate it.
Exactly.
But how do we prove that a tiny 5-minute action is actually stronger than the avoidance circuit I run for like 10 hours a day?
That's a really necessary question.
If I spend all day procrastinating and only 5 minutes studying, won't the procrastination circuit just win?
Well, this is where the competitive aspect comes in. Neural circuits literally compete for what the sources call real estate in your
For the
brain.
win grab.
Kind of. If you
Mhm.
use a circuit often, it occupies more space and resources.
Hmm.
But if you stop using a circuit like the one for that grammar you learned last year, it begins to degrade.
And that's called synaptic pruning. It sounds a little dramatic, like trimming a dead branch off a tree.
It's a perfect biological metaphor. The brain systematically eliminates neural connections that aren't being used. It's freeing up space and energy for the ones that are being used regularly.
So if I consistently avoid my English tasks, or I always default to scrolling social media instead of opening my notebook,
Then those avoidance and distraction pathways get stronger. They become the path of least resistance, the default setting.
right?
But if you train yourself to take small, imperfect English action every day, you start to weaken those old avoidance pathways.
And you strengthen the new, action-oriented ones.
You're literally shaping the architecture of your brain with every repeated behavior you choose. Consistency is literally neurological reconstruction.
Wow. So the real power of consistent effort is that it's a slow, steady remodeling project happening inside your head.
Exactly. And this quiet power leads us directly to our first piece of essential vocabulary.
Because it describes how most people miss this silent strength.
Wait, that's a cool word. I've heard underestimate, but I never really get it. What does it mean in plain English?
To underestimate something means to think it's smaller, or less important, or less difficult than it actually is.
So you're judging its value or its power too low.
Exactly. In the context of our deep dive, most people underestimate the power of consistency. They think talent or luck is more important.
So they think it's just a simple idea, but it's actually the fundamental ingredient for change.
Let's hear some examples.
Okay, so a formal one. The company underestimated the severity of the economic downturn, leading to major budget cuts later in the year.
Got it.
A casual one. I really underestimated how hard that intermediate English vocabulary test was going to be. I only studied for 2 hours, but I needed 4.
Been there.
And a funny or weird one. I completely underestimated how aggressive those little squirrels were in the park. They chased me for my sandwich.
Never underestimate a squirrel.
Never.
Okay, let's try to use it in a conversation about learning.
All right, let's talk about that long English article you had to read last week.
Okay, so I definitely underestimated how long it would take me to read that English article. I planned for like 15 minutes because the topic looked easy, but it took an hour and a half because I had to look up so many nuanced verbs.
It happens to everyone. So next time, you should probably underestimate the complexity of the reading less, or just plan for more time.
Good tip. I won't underestimate the source material next time. So what about collocations?
We often intensify this word. We say things like greatly underestimate, vastly underestimate, or completely underestimate.
Okay.
And we pair it with concepts like risk, time, difficulty, or power. So you'll often hear the phrase, never underestimate the power of a small habit.
Never underestimate the power of a small habit. That phrase perfectly sets us up for our next segment.
Digging deeper into the molecule that drives these repetitive small actions forward.
We need to talk about dopamine.
We do. And this molecule is almost universally misunderstood, even in popular science. But it's the key to unlocking consistency.
I think the common mistake is believing that dopamine is just the pleasure molecule.
Right, the reward.
The thing that gives you that satisfying rush when you eat chocolate or finally finish a tough job.
That's only the final short burst. The sources emphasize its primary role is far more important for consistency. Dopamine is primarily the molecule of motivation,
The motivation.
of drive, and of pursuit. It's released when you anticipate a reward, and crucially when you begin moving toward a goal, especially one that requires effort.
So it's not the molecule of enjoying the gold medal at the end, but the molecule that gets you out the door to start training for the race in the first place.
Exactly. Our brain evolved to reward the behavior that leads to future resources. For our ancestors, consistent, difficult effort, the hunt, the struggle, often determined survival.
Okay.
The brain learned to reward that effort and commitment.
And what's critical here is that core insight. Action actually creates motivation, not the other way around.
Yes. Waiting for that magical, I feel inspired mood is the flawed strategy we mentioned earlier.
It's the biggest trap.
It is. The core insight is that action triggers reward chemistry. When you initiate a behavior that moves you toward a goal like starting your 10 minutes of English listening, dopamine begins to rise.
And you said there's a powerful part to this.
Here it is. If that initial behavior feels difficult or it requires overcoming inertia, that dopamine spike becomes more meaningful.
Right. Why would difficulty increase the neurochemical reward? That feels backwards.
Because your brain is designed for efficiency. If a task is easy, the brain assumes it's low value. But when a task requires genuine commitment, like waking up 15 minutes early to study English, your brain essentially tags that action as high priority. It's important. The greater the challenge you overcome by starting, the greater the reinforcement you get.
That explains that feeling. You sit down, you struggle for the first 3 minutes to concentrate, but once you're moving, you feel that sudden surge of clarity or focus.
That is the neurochemical cascade kicking off.
That's my brain rewarding me for starting.
The action turns on the dopamine, which then makes it easier to continue the task. And this leads directly to the self-reinforcing loop that builds habits.
Okay, so the loop is behavior happens, I open the book.
Then dopamine is released. You're making progress.
Motivation increases, I can do this.
And that increased motivation reinforces the behavior itself, making it slightly easier to open the book tomorrow.
That's a perfect synthesis. You've trained your brain to release dopamine in response to consistent, challenging action.
And that makes showing up tomorrow just a little bit easier. You begin to associate the initial effort and struggle with the reward, not just the eventual success. This is the neurological basis of persistence.
So it's not about being superhuman, it's just chemistry shaped by small behaviors over time. And that finding about anticipation, you said that was key.
Oh, the anticipation finding is critical. The sources point out that the anticipation of a reward often produces more dopamine than the reward itself. Yeah. For example, when hunting, the rush of dopamine was higher when the hunter sighted the prey than when they actually consumed it.
So for us, the most powerful chemical spike happens the moment we decide to act, the moment we overcome the inertia of starting the English lesson.
Precisely. You learn to value the moment you begin over the moment you finish.
That's a huge mental shift.
It is. You focus on initiation over outcome. You stop waiting for the stars to align. You act first, and you let the chemistry follow.
That's an incredible protocol for action. And when you do this enough, when that pathway is compressed and reinforced, your routines become so automatic that they don't require that conscious fight anymore.
They start to run on what we call autopilot,
Which is our second piece of essential English vocabulary today.
the goal state of every successful habit builder.
Wait, autopilot is a cool word. I know it's about, flying planes automatically, but how do we use it for our daily habits?
It means you do it routinely, efficiently, and without needing conscious decision-making. You're not debating with yourself.
So the behavior is so ingrained that you perform the action almost subconsciously. It uses very little mental energy.
Exactly, like when you drive your regular route to the grocery store, sometimes you get there and you don't even remember the specific turns you took.
Yeah. My body and brain were just running that process on autopilot.
Exactly. That neural pathway is strong. Let's look at some examples.
Okay.
A formal one. Once the new quarterly report system was implemented, the finance team ran the weekly process on autopilot, improving efficiency dramatically.
Makes sense.
Casual. I was so tired this morning I made coffee and drove to work completely on autopilot. I was barely aware of the traffic lights.
I think we've all done that.
And, funny weird, my friend cleans his entire apartment on autopilot when he's stressed. He finds himself scrubbing the kitchen floor and doesn't even remember starting.
Wow, that's a useful form of autopilot. Let's try a quick scenario about studying.
Okay. Do you still have to mentally argue with yourself? Should I study English today or watch a movie?
No, I don't debate it anymore. When I get home, I drop my bag, go to the kitchen, and put the kettle on.
Hmm.
While the water boils, I just hit play on the daily news podcast and start repeating phrases. It's now running on autopilot.
Because you made it part of your existing routine. That is the ultimate goal of consistency. You stop negotiating with yourself.
So, what are the key collocations for autopilot that we should practice?
The main ones are run on autopilot, which describes the action, on autopilot, which describes the state, and sometimes switch to autopilot.
I want my entire English study plan to switch to autopilot by next month.
Well, that means we need to talk about setting up the system. Because if the brain seeks the path of least resistance, we have to deliberately engineer that path.
Which moves us into segment 3, engineering success through friction reduction.
This is one of the most immediately actionable takeaways for our learners today.
So let's start with a really detailed definition. What is behavioral friction, and why is it such an underestimated barrier?
Behavioral friction is resistance. Physical, cognitive, emotional. Any obstacle that stands between your intention to act and the action itself.
So the subtle, often invisible roadblocks.
Exactly. It's underestimated because we often blame ourselves for failing, when really we just fail to remove the roadblocks. The brain will always follow the path of least resistance.
So even if I deeply want to study, these small obstacles activate a resistance signal in my brain that says, too much effort required. Retreat.
Precisely. Let's use that journaling example from the source. It really resonates with English learners who want to write more.
Okay.
You're committed to writing one paragraph in English every morning after breakfast. You know it's crucial for fluency.
Right. But when the morning comes, my specific English notebook is tucked away in the closet, I can't find a good pen, and my phone is buzzing with notifications right next to my coffee.
Those are all points of friction. Finding the notebook, searching for the pen, closing the notifications. You encounter resistance before you write the first word.
And the brain interprets that delay as a signal that the task is hard.
And maybe unnecessary. And what happens next?
I usually grab my phone instead, because that required zero friction. It was already in my hand, unlocked, and glowing.
And your default high-friction habits take over. The source points out clearly. This is not a failure of discipline. It's a systems problem.
The friction raised the activation threshold too high. Can you explain that term again? What's the activation threshold?
Certainly. Think of it as the amount of mental effort required for your brain to switch from thinking about studying to actually studying.
From contemplation to execution.
Exactly. When you have high friction, like a cluttered desk or missing materials, you raise that threshold high into the air. Overcoming it requires intense effort from your prefrontal cortex.
Which we know suffers from decision fatigue really quickly. We only have a limited amount of willpower.
Exactly. Friction depletes that limited resource before you even start the main task. But when you apply friction reduction, you actively lower that threshold.
The action becomes simpler, more obvious.
Less mentally stressful to initiate. This is why small setup choices have such a disproportionate impact on long-term consistency.
So let's talk practical strategies. How do we design an environment that reduces friction for language learning specifically?
We use environment design. We set things up for our future self.
Okay.
If your goal is to practice shadowing English speakers while you cook dinner, your wireless earphones should already be sitting on the counter, fully charged, next to a note reminding you of the podcast title.
No searching, no charging, no debating.
Exactly. And we absolutely must manage the digital environment. This is a huge source of cognitive friction.
It's like trying to walk that neural pathway when someone is constantly throwing grass in front of you.
Precisely. Reducing digital friction means ruthlessly closing unnecessary tabs, using focused work modes, scheduling notification blocks. These aren't about self-control, they're about creating the conditions where focus happens naturally.
And finally, the most powerful tool for just starting the session is the on-touch rule.
Yes, you make the behavior so easy to start that it requires only a single immediate step,
Like just opening the notebook and writing the date.
or simply pressing play on the audio track. The brain rewards momentum once initiation occurs. That dopamine spike can turn a 60-second win into a 30-minute deep study session.
But you only get there if the starting point is accessible and low friction.
Which brings us to our third key term today, because this whole segment is based on this concept of resistance, which we're calling friction.
Wait, I know friction from, like, high school physics when things rub together and slow down. Is it just a metaphor here?
It's both. It's a powerful metaphor, but it's treated as a concrete concept in behavioral science. Friction refers to any obstacle, any resistance that makes starting a behavior difficult or slow.
So it's the mental or physical rubbing that stops you from moving forward.
Exactly. Let's look at the examples.
Okay.
Formal. To increase productivity, the systems manager implemented steps to reduce technological friction in the team's software integration process. Casual. If you leave your workout clothes scattered around your room instead of neatly folded, you create unnecessary friction for your future self when you wake up.
Definitely guilty of that one.
And funny weird. I'm trying to learn calligraphy, but the biggest friction I face is the fact that my dog keeps eating the expensive ink cartridges.
That is some high-stakes friction. Let's try a quick scenario role play.
Okay. Imagine you want to listen to a full English language news broadcast every evening on your commute home. What is one major point of friction you can remove before you leave the office?
Ah, that's smart. The cognitive friction is deciding which news source to use, searching for it, dealing with ads. So I need to create a specific downloaded playlist of 3 short, ad-free English broadcasts the night before.
Spot on. You remove the decision-making process when your brain is tired and depleted. That's how you win the consistency battle.
So what are the key collocations for this use of friction?
We often use it with verbs like reduce friction, create friction, or eliminate friction. And you'll hear phrases like points of friction, sources of friction, and behavioral friction.
Behavioral friction is such an important concept. Okay, now that we've engineered the environment, let's move into the actual tactical toolkit for the English learner.
Segment 4 is about the practical, small actions that compound into massive results. The first principle is the power of small actions, often called the 1% rule.
I love the 1% rule because it immediately makes the goal feel achievable. It bypasses the brain's natural resistance to big, overwhelming goals.
Correct. The sources emphasize you don't need to be perfect. You just need to improve by a tiny, non-zero amount every day. The focus is on the compounding effect.
So if I commit to learning just 5 new English words a day, that sounds minimal, almost insignificant.
Right, but that compounds to over 1,800 new words in a year. That's a staggering transformation.
Or listening to just 15 minutes of difficult English content every day.
Over a year. That's over 90 hours of targeted listening practice. That consistency is the big leap done slowly.
And then there's habit stacking. This is about linking a new English habit to an existing routine.
Yes, what the sources technically call the habit-goal interface. You're using an automatic on-autopilot behavior as a rock-solid trigger for the new English habit.
So you don't rely on willpower. The decision is already made.
You rely on the rhythm of your day. The structure is simple. After current habit, I will new English habit.
So after I brew my tea, I will write 1 English sentence in my journal.
Or every time I start my car, I will switch the radio to an English-only station. It fuses the two behaviors neurologically.
And to protect that consistency, especially on the inevitable bad days, we introduce micro rules and the bare minimum.
These are small, non-negotiable contracts you make with yourself when you are rational to protect you from your future tired self.
This is how we outsmart the part of our brain that wants immediate comfort.
Precisely. It could be no social media until I finish reading 2 pages of my English book.
Or no dinner until I practice speaking English aloud for 90 seconds.
And the bare minimum is the absolute lifesaver. Even when you are stressed, traveling, or sick, you must define a tiny, non-negotiable action.
It has to take less than 5 minutes and require 0 setup.
Yes. like listening to 2 minutes of English audio while waiting for the elevator.
But why is that tiny action so vital? Am I actually learning anything new in 2 minutes?
The point of the bare minimum isn't the learning outcome of that one day. It's the identity in the streak. It sends the message to your brain. I am a person who practices English every day. I am not quitting. I am just adjusting the scale today. That mindset preserves the habit.
It stops the guilt from derailing the whole process.
Exactly. Which brings us to the ultimate self-compassion strategy, the 2-day rule.
This one is simple but essential. If you miss one day,
Never allow yourself to miss 2 days in a row. It's okay to skip Tuesday. Life happens. But Wednesday must be a non-negotiable return, even if you only do the bare minimum.
focus on resuming quickly.
Don't let a single slip turn into a complete abandonment.
That idea of quiet, non-dramatic transformation, where the progress is so subtle you barely notice it, is captured perfectly in our next idiom.
Indeed. It's the kind of progress that happens organically through these small, repetitive wins.
I love the phrase sneaks up on you. It sounds a bit mysterious. Is it used only for, like, people physically surprising you?
No, it's used much more broadly. When something sneaks up on you, it means it happens slowly, quietly, or unexpectedly, and then suddenly you notice the impact.
So it often relates to things that accumulate over time, like progress or deadlines.
Exactly, because the progress is only 1% a day. You don't register the change until you look back a few months later and realize the difference is massive. The result sneaks up on you.
Got it. Let's hear some examples.
Okay, formal. The gradual shift in consumer behavior was so subtle that the market changes snuck up on the unprepared industry. Casual. I didn't realize how much time passed while I was enjoying my hobby. The flight departure time completely snuck up on me.
I've done that.
And a weird one. I completely forgot I signed up for that marathon. And the training schedule is so gentle that the race day completely snuck up on me.
Huh. I wish a marathon would sneak up on me. Let's try a scenario.
You've been consistently shadowing English speakers every morning for 3 months. When did you realize your pronunciation had actually improved?
Well, I look back at my old English voice recordings from the first month, and my improved fluency really snuck up on me.
Ah,
I didn't notice the progress day by day, but now I listen to the old recordings, and the difference is huge.
that's the power of consistency. The small daily changes happen so quietly that the large transformation eventually sneaks up on you. You just realize you've become a much better speaker.
And what are the common collocations for sneaks up on you?
It's typically used with nouns like time, deadlines, changes, or progress.
Yeah.
You might also hear, it crept up on me, but sneaks up on you is more common.
Okay, let's connect all of this now to the concept that makes persistence stick for good: identity and self-regulated learning.
This moves us to segment 5, which is the most academic and possibly the most powerful section of this deep dive.
The most profound driver of long-term consistency.
We've talked about the mechanical science, but the sources explain that consistency only becomes effortless when it aligns with your core identity.
I think most people assume that identity follows behavior. Once I am fluent, I will feel like an English speaker.
Right, but the sources suggest we must reverse that.
Behave as if the identity is already true now.
Yes. You redefine your identity first. Instead of saying, I am trying to learn English, you shift to, I am an English speaker who practices every day. You behave as if it's already true, and over time, reality catches up.
And this aligns with that concept of cognitive consistency, right?
Yeah.
The brain works to resolve internal conflict.
Absolutely. The brain hates cognitive dissonance, the clash between your actions and your self-image.
So if I believe I am lazy, but I try to study for an hour, my brain creates resistance to resolve that conflict.
It favors the self-image. But if you consistently tell yourself, I am a person who practices English every day, your brain begins to adjust its internal models to match that statement.
My actions become evidence of my identity.
They stop being motivational freezes and start being neural instructions. The more evidence you accumulate, the more stable and effortless the identity becomes.
At that point, you're no longer trying to be disciplined, you are disciplined.
Now, let's bring in the academic view that supports this. Self-regulated learning, or SRL. It's considered the key to success in online learning.
The source mentioned SRL is a highly specific, self-directed, cyclic process. We should detail those 3 main phases.
Absolutely. SRL ensures that learners don't just study, they study strategically. The cycle is forethought, performance, and self-reflection.
Okay, let's start with forethought. What does that phase look like for an English learner?
Forethought is the planning phase before you learn. It includes goal setting and strategic planning. So, setting SMART goals, like, I will learn 20 new phrases related to finance this week.
So, forethought is setting the target and the map before you start the car.
Exactly. The next phase is performance.
Mm.
This is the action phase. Here, the key SRL strategies are monitoring and time management.
How does an English learner monitor their performance while they're doing it? That seems hard.
It involved conscious self-awareness. Monitoring means asking, am I actually absorbing this vocabulary or am I just reading the words? If you're drifting, you use environmental structuring, turning off your phone to refocus.
So, performance isn't just about doing the work, it's about managing the work while you're doing it.
It is, which leads to the final and most often skipped phase, self-reflection. This happens after the study session.
Which involves self-evaluation,
Yep.
right? Judging the quality of the work.
Yes, you might reread your written paragraph and correct mistakes, or listen to your practice recordings and compare them to a native speaker's audio. You're rating your own progress against the goal you set in the forethought phase.
So, SRL is a dynamic self-correcting cycle. You plan, you execute and monitor, and then you evaluate and refine the plan for next time.
And the research strongly supports this. That systematic review found that SRL strategies contributed positively to student achievement in a staggering 96% of the studies.
96%. That is an almost unheard of success rate in education research.
It tells us that success isn't determined by who has the best resources, but by who has the best strategy for using them. And notice the alignment. The top SRL strategies are goal setting, time management, and environmental structuring.
Which is our friction reduction.
The scientific fields agree. The neurological advice and the academic strategy are perfectly aligned.
And becoming self-sufficient, being the person who drives their own learning process, brings us to our final target concept.
Exactly.
The sources use the word autonomous a lot when describing the successful self-regulated learner. What does autonomous learning mean exactly in our context?
Autonomous learning means having the ability to take full responsibility for your own learning.
Okay.
It means making your own choices about what, how, and when you study without relying solely on a teacher or a rigid class schedule to tell you what to do next.
It's the ultimate evolution, graduating from student to self-teacher.
Exactly. Let's look at some examples. Formal. The university promotes autonomous learning by providing flexible online modules and vast digital libraries.
Right.
Casual. She's a very autonomous English learner. She doesn't wait for homework. She actively seeks out native English speakers online to practice.
I love that.
And a funny one. My teenage son is very autonomous when it comes to deciding what snacks to eat. He manages his own pantry raids entirely by himself.
Huh. He's a highly self-regulated snacker. Let's try a quick role play.
Okay. If you've been relying on one textbook for the last 6 months, how can you become more autonomous in your English studies this week?
I can stop waiting for the textbook to give me a list of vocabulary. Instead, I can choose a topic I find interesting like environmental news and start setting my own study schedule based on those real-world articles.
That's true autonomous learning.
Perfect. You move from reacting to an external schedule to directing your own internal curriculum. So what are the key collocations for autonomous?
You often hear autonomous learner, develop autonomy, and autonomous learning environment. It's always closely associated with words like self-directed and self-sufficient.
Understanding that transformation from a passive student to an autonomous learner is the key. Now, before we wrap up and get to that crucial number we promised.
The common mistake segment.
Yes. We need to address a very common grammatical mistake we hear from learners.
Let's hear it. This is vital for our listeners to sound more natural.
Okay. Can I say I have to make consistency to finish my English homework? I've heard people say make a habit, so can I make consistency?
That's a very logical mistake because
Yeah.
you can make a decision or make a plan.
Right.
However, in English, consistency isn't something you make like a physical object. It's the result of ongoing effort.
Ah, so what verbs do native speakers use with consistency?
We would actually say, I have to build consistency in my English studies because it's like constructing a house piece by piece.
Build consistency.
Or, I need to maintain consistency in my shadowing practice to sustain an existing habit. You can also say develop consistency. The focus is on the long-term process.
Build, maintain, develop. Got it. That sounds so much more natural.
Excellent. And now, for the moment we promised, it's time for the pop quiz and the big reveal. Are you ready, listener?
I am ready, and I've been waiting for this number. My guess is 30 days, maybe 40.
Let's test your memory first. Question 1. What word means to judge something as less important than it actually is, especially small habits?
That's underestimate. Never underestimate the power of habit.
Correct. Question 2. What's the scientific term for the obstacle that prevents you from starting a task, like a messy desk?
That's friction. Behavioral friction. We have to reduce it to 0.
Absolutely spot on. And finally, the big teaser. What is the average number of days it takes for a new behavior to become completely automatic?
Okay, I was guessing 40 days because that's what I read somewhere once.
The researchers found that the average time for a behavior to become automatic running on autopilot was 66 days.
66 days. Wow. That is over 2 full months of repeated, consistent action. That's so much longer than the mythical 21 days people always quote.
It is, and that is a critical piece of information. But the most important context is that the range was incredibly wide.
How wide?
Some participants reached automaticity in just 18 days, but for others, with really complex habits, it took up to 254 days.
That's almost 9 months. That tells you exactly why people quit. They give up after 30 days thinking they failed, when really they were only halfway to the average.
The 66-day average gives you permission to be patient with yourself. Your job isn't to feel motivated every day. Your job is simply to maintain the streak until the 67th day and the 68th and so on.
That is such a powerful finding. Consistency is simply persistence through that awkward 66-day phase.
So let's summarize the 3 most important concepts you need to take away from today's deep dive.
First, consistency is a skill, not a trait. It is a biological process of repetition that you can train every single day.
Second, action creates motivation. Don't wait for inspiration. Initiate the action first, that micro step, and let the dopamine follow.
And third, identity is key. You must adopt the identity of I am an autonomous English speaker who practices every day.
So here's your micro challenge for the day. Right now, before you open another app, identify your non-negotiable 5 minutes of English practice for today. Make it so small your brain cannot refuse.
Identify that non-negotiable 5 minutes, and then tell someone, a friend, a family member, or even us in the comments below to create a little accountability. Just show up today.
And if this deep dive helped you understand the mechanics of habit formation, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the English Unlimited podcast.
Your support keeps these deep dives coming. I'm Charlie. See you next time.
And I'm Jamie. Bye.